In 2019, YouTube was caught violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies that are meant to serve as a smokescreen so they can dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. As such, for my own protection, it is my obligation to advise you that this video is not aimed at children. My target audience is not children. Parental discretion is advised. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Doctor Who Flux, Chapter 3, Once Upon Time. As always, since I do these unscripted, I will be putting a blanket spoiler warning just in case. I will try to avoid talking about spoilers. Actually, not this time, but because there are some things towards the end I do want to talk about. But so far, this might be the weakest episode of Flux. That's not saying a lot because the previous two episodes were both 9 out of 10. So, yeah, to go from that to this, like I said, that's not saying much. This is still a decent episode. I think the first half is the weakest part. A lot of people have been saying they've had trouble following along with Flux because it just kind of throws you into it. And, you know, while I haven't had that problem, I'm not discounting the people who do. With this episode, I can kind of see where they're coming from, because that's what happens. So after the cliffhanger from the previous episode, this episode starts with all of our main characters in the middle of the time storm, and them being displaced through time in various fractured realities. And while the Doctor is trying to team up with the Mori, the sort of guardians of time from the Temple of Atropos, to put things right, put things back together again. So we get several sort of plot points throughout these various time streams. With Dan, we see him back in Liverpool. We briefly see him travel back in the 1800s and meet that aristocratic gentleman whose name I keep forgetting. And I'm starting to get annoyed with this character. It's like, what is this plot line? What does it mean in the grand scheme of things? All we've really gotten for him were cameos, and we don't know. And, you know, I want to know what this guy's deal is. I want to know what this mine is for. I want to know what he's preparing for and what he's fighting against. And the fact that we're now 3 episodes in and we still have nothing, and, you know, there's 3 episodes left. It's like, are we ever going to get that? Ooh. Is that what episode 4 is going to be about? We'll see. But yeah, that's my point. With this particular character and that particular plot line, I'm just kind of frustrated that everything else has kind of gotten some answers in some way. Not everything has been answered, but we've gotten something. And with this particular character, we just haven't yet. Did I already mention this? And by the way, I think the weakest part of the episode is the first half. The later half of the episode is really good. But anyway, Dan's in Liverpool. We see a little bit more about his life, because the Doctor said with everything going on, the best place to put Yaz, Dan, and Vinder is in their own time streams. Yaz's is probably the most interesting, even though, like Dan's, we get very brief glimpses of it. But because, as Yaz points out to the Doctor, they are based on her memories, but things aren't happening right. And furthermore, something interesting that is going to lead into the next episode is that because, you know, they feed on time, and we saw this in the beginning, a weeping angel got into the time storm. And now somehow it's hunting Yaz. And that was handled really well. Like, it's there long enough that, you know, you get an idea of what's going on, and it's great tension, and again, a good lead in into the next episode, but it doesn't linger on it for too long, so it doesn't end up overtaking the plot of this episode. So that's Dan and Yaz. Oh, and the performances in this story are all really good, because across the characters' time streams, the other characters, the Doctor, show up as people in their past. So, like, in the Doctor's timeline, Yaz, Dan, and Vinder show up taking the place of people she met. Or like in Yaz's or in Vinder's timeline, Yaz shows up as his commanding officer. Vinder's timeline is kind of where we finally get an explanation of what his deal is. It's really good. It's very subtly played, and you get and yeah, I just said that. You get kind of an idea of what his deal is, why he was on that dilapidated space station at the start of chapter 1. I don't want to say too much on that, but it feels like his part in the story has ended, and it's kind of anticlimactic. I hope that's not the case, given what else happened in this story. So, another plotline we get is the story of this woman named Belle, who seems to be traveling across the universe after it's been devastated by the Flux. Not a big fan of the captions, but I kind of get what their intention is. Because this story takes place across fractured timelines, the captions are kind of there to say, by the way, this plotline is taking place in real time. I think that could have been handled better, but that is the intention of the captions. It's like, while we have this fractured reality story going on, this is going on in reality. Belle's story is okay. Until the very end, when we found out what was going on, I couldn't really mesh with it. But then when we see who exactly she is, that made the payoff a little better. And it's also kind of interesting because so she is traveling through a universe post-Flux. The Flux has kind of devastated the universe. And we see that the various enemies have been taking advantage of the Flux's devastation. Like last episode we saw with the Sontarans, which get a mention here. And the Daleks and the Cybermen have also been taking advantage of it. I imagine a lot of people are going to be really mad about that because in the advertisements and stuff, the Cybermen were kind of built up to be a major part of the episode, and they're pretty much just a cameo. I'm fine with that myself. I do not mind that, given we just had a big Cyberman story. So I'm fine with them being a cameo. Oh, we also get new Dalek designs. You know, they're Davies era Daleks, but they're much more bronze. Like, the Davies era Daleks were this sort of bronzish gold, or this goldish bronze. These are just pure bronze, or not even bronze, they're copper. And they look great. As far as New Who designs go, they're my second favorite Dalek design after the clone Daleks from Revolution of the Daleks. But, you know, enough about that, because like I said, cameo. And that's really all I can say about Belle's story. It's just, you know, like I said, it's the weakest part, one of the weakest parts of the episode, and the payoff makes it worth it, but it is still fairly weak. And the thing I've been kind of holding off on, the Doctor's timeline in this fractured reality, while she's trying to help the Morai put time back together. So the Doctor finds herself in her past during the siege of Atropos, the temple that we saw last episode. And she finds herself, she's basically learning how the Ravagers, Swarm and Azure, were initially imprisoned. And this was done by the Division, of which Carvanista is a member. And that was really geniusly done. Basically, John Bishop, as Dan, is playing Carvanista, and it's kind of amazing. But we found out this was done during her time as the Fugitive Doctor. This was one thing I was spoiled on, unfortunately, because in a Discord chat, someone mentioned they saw it on their Instagram, and I was foolish enough, I logged into the wrong chat, so I know Joe Martin comes back. And it's really interesting because, in her reflection and stuff, both the Doctor, the 13th Doctor and the Fugitive Doctor, realized this shouldn't be happening the way it is. Like, the Fugitive Doctor realizes the 13th Doctor should not be at this point in her timeline. I feel like they could have done more with this. I feel like once we got the revelation of what was going on, Joe Martin should have done the bulk of this episode, at least with the Doctor's plot line. This part of the Doctor's timeline. So I'm not thrilled with that. Although I did like them switching off of each other. Jodie Whittaker and Joe Martin both give great performances. I also like Swarm at this point in time. He is sort of emaciated. He is how we saw him in the Halloween Apocalypse before he rejuvenated himself. And the actor does a really good job of changing his physicality to match this prior state and everything. Like his voice is raspier, he moves slower, he's not as flamboyant. It shows that he's not at his full power yet. We also get a lot of information about the passengers, and they have a do I want to show a screenshot of that? No, I'm not. Because we remember we got them in the promotional material last year, and then they were introduced in the previous episode, and then we learn what they are. They are basically human-shaped prisons. That's an interesting concept. Because, in the present, in real time, with Swarm and Azure, there is one left. So I kind of hope we see more of what the passengers are kind of explored. And where do I want to go from there? Oh, the Doctor gets a new costume here. Now, I want to be clear on this. I love the 13th Doctor's costume. Just the way it kind of clashes and it looks awkward and none of the colors match. It's very evocative of Colin Baker's costume, and I really like it for that reason. Here, the Doctor gets a new coat, a sort of dark navy blue one. And I really like that look. I wish there was a way that it would have become the norm rather than just being alternate timeline. Rather than it just being used to denote an alternate timeline. So all that being said, before I get to some of the big stuff, or no, I'm just going to talk about one of the big things, I thought this episode would be bigger. As Flux is only 6 chapters, this is the halfway point. So I thought something big was going to happen that would have changed the trajectory of the narrative going forward. Now, because that's not what we got, I'm not mad. I don't find that disappointing or anything. That was my interpretation. Ooh. Unless, I'm just thinking about this right now. Unless this is supposed to be, as a 6-chapter serial, unless this is supposed to be a 4-2. Now, I don't know if that's a real thing or if that's just my friend Jacob's name for it, but in Classic Who, a lot of 6-parters were done in what me and him call the 4-2 format, where basically the first 4 parts of the serial were one story, but then the cliffhanger of that 4th episode would sort of change the trajectory for the last 2 episodes, making them something kind of entirely different. Sort of the 2 biggest examples of this, off the top of my head, are The Talons of Wang Chiang, a 4th Doctor story, where throughout the first 4 parts of this episode, the Doctor and Leela are sort of trying to investigate what's going on. Where are all these women disappearing? What is the villain after? But then in episode 4, the villain, Magnus Greel, wins. This sort of cabinet that he's been after, I'm not going to get into details, he gets his hands on it. He's won. So then, rather than trying to solve this mystery to the end, the last 2 episodes become trying to stop, rather than trying to figure out what's going on, they become trying to stop the villain. Another example, with little more clear cut, of a 4-2 is the serial The Invasion of Time. A not really good story, but it kind of fits this idea. Basically, the first 4 parts of The Invasion of Time, another Tom Baker story, are that Gallifrey has been invaded by an alien race called the Vardens. And the first 4 episodes is the Doctor stopping them. But then, in the episode 4 cliffhanger, we learn that the Vardens were not alone. And when they are defeated, and it seems like they've won, Gallifrey is invaded by the Sontarans, which become the last 2 episodes of that story. So now going forward, that is kind of just making this up on the spot. That is my speculation with Flux, that this 6-part story is going to be done in the 4-2 format. Overall, like I said, Once Upon Time is the weakest episode to date. We got fantastic performances. Vinder's backstory is really good. And, like I said, the performances from all the actors playing different roles in the various timelines is good. But it's got a weak first half that builds up to, oh, no, why am I doing the wrap-up now? There was the big thing I wanted to talk about. So the other thing, I don't know what the reaction is to this yet, but we get a big revelation in this story. The Ravagers, Swarm, and Azure are not the main villains of Flux. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, but as time is being... Actually, two on that. Swarm says something interesting, because all throughout Doctor Who, the Doctor has talked about adventures in time and space. I know that's kind of broad, but... And then here, in this episode, Swarm kind of drops this idea that time and space are actually at war with each other. It sounds cool. I wish we got more of an explanation into just what that means, but it sounds really cool, and it kind of sounds like, one of those things that the Doctors believe their entire lives is a lie. Anyway, before I get distracted again, the big thing I wanted to talk about. I don't know what the reaction is yet, and I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments, but in this episode, we get the revelation that Swarm and Azure, the Ravagers, are not the main villains of the story. So, while the time storm is being repaired, the Doctor suddenly finds herself pulled out of time by a mysterious old woman. And this woman tells her that the Flux and the Ravagers were the catalyst. The way she talks about it sounds almost bureaucratic. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. But basically, this universe's time is done. The Flux, the Ravagers are meant to sort of be a catalyst to what's to come. So the Flux, the time storm, the Flux, was meant to destroy space. And in turn, to speed along the destruction of the universe, the Ravagers were meant to destroy time. So yeah, like I said, that's all. That got me really interested, like I said. So we now have this revelation that despite what the previous episodes made it look like, Swarm and Azure, as I've said 3 times now, I'm sorry, are not the main villains of Flux. And now I'm more interested than ever about what's going on. So now the wrap-up, like I said, Once Upon Time really just has a weak first half with a great build-up, to a great second half. I think I'm going to give... I don't know what I'm going to score it. I think I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10, because I constantly just go between 6, above average, and 7, good. I'm not quite sure where I'd put it, though. But those are just my thoughts on Once Upon Time. Did you see the episode yet? Please start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. In the description box below, you'll find a link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.